Welcome to the Dental Marketing Secrets Podcast, where we provide insight and feedback on what's working right now in the world of dental marketing so that you can grow your practice, serve more patients, and leave a greater impact in the end. I'm your host, Mark Thackeray. I am so excited for this next interview. I have Dr. Angela Mulrooney, who is the founder of Unleashing Influence, joining us on the show. And first off, she shares an incredible story. Her backstory is remarkable and has a lot of parallels. I think a lot of people will find parallels to her story, to their story as well, but almost magnified. She has just overcome so many things. I just couldn't believe how many challenges came up again and again, you know, from financial crisis to litigation issues to eventually an injury to her right hand that forced her out of the chair and forced her to reinvent herself and do something far different than she ever planned. And just so neat. So that's at the beginning of the interview. So you definitely tune into that. But you're going to want to hear the rest of what she has to say, because we're talking about using LinkedIn to promote your dental practice. And this is what Angela's done to build her company and to help other practices, help other business owners to do the same. And it's really remarkable because for me, I was really eager to talk to Angela because I hadn't thought of LinkedIn as something that a regular practice could take advantage of, because LinkedIn is traditionally more of a B2B type of social platform, which it is. You know, there's a lot of business to business connections going on there, but Angela shares ways to really laser in on and connect with that ideal demographic that you're going after, that audience that is best suited for your practice, and how to do that. You know, she gives some great tips on the content to create, as well as how to make that connection, what that looks like. Oh man, I ended up taking a page and a half of notes. And I just opened up my Google Doc and I started typing away as she was going about this, because I'm not a LinkedIn expert by any stretch. So it was great to get all this insight and based off Angela's expertise and experience. So you're going to want to listen to this and take notes while you do. You're going to love this interview. So let's get started. Here's Angela. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. I have Dr. Angela Mulrooney here with me of Unleashing Influence. Super excited to talk to Angela today about LinkedIn and how to promote your dental practice on LinkedIn. But first off, welcome, Angela. Thanks for joining us on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mark.
You bet. And as I mentioned to you before, that LinkedIn is a topic that I haven't ever really addressed on the show, but it is something that presents a huge opportunity for a lot of us to connect with the community and really position ourselves as an authority within the dental industry. But I wanted to have you start. You have such a unique story. If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes and kind of share your backstory, because I think it's going to provide a lot of context for our listeners.
For sure. So when I was about 2, I started to really like teeth, and my parents don't actually know where that came from at all. But suddenly I wanted my fingers in everyone's mouths. So that kind of set the journey for me becoming a dentist. And at 24, I graduated dental school, and I was so passionate about teeth. The only problem is I'm someone who's actually extremely shy, especially back then. Like, I've worked through a lot now, but for me to talk to adults, it was torture. So I focused my practice on working with little kids as an associate in lots of different practices, because I could just tell them stories about their sugar bugs, how they were doing cartwheels and backflips up into the suction. So that was my little kid-centered comfort zone. And I stayed in that for the first 4 years of my career. And then I reached a crossroads where I was like, so I either go and do pediatric school and become a specialist, or something has to change, because I was plateauing. So Kismet came along, and I landed into an adult-based practice in the worst part of town, run by a 78-year-old dentist. And the practice was exactly what you'd expect in that part of town with that old of a practitioner. It was still like it was the 1960s. Gloves were worn maybe 5 years before that. So that was 2008. So a little bit behind the times, a little bit old school, we could call it. So I walked in there, and it was a locum, actually. The dentist was quite sick. He was in the hospital. We knew he was probably going to pass. And for some reason, I fell in love with the practice and decided to buy it.
Wow.
So you can imagine it was a little bit of a learning curve, jumping into a practice like that, having been primarily a peds practitioner and then just having this practice that was all adult based. They were terrified of the dentist because he was big and rough. And so I decided I was going to turn it around and turn into my dream practice. And everyone told me that was insanity, that it would never happen. So I decided I was going to prove them wrong. And the next year, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I increased production by 73%,
Wow.
just by sheer willpower. No business sense whatsoever. I just knew how to work really hard.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And unfortunately, shortly after that, I ended up in a really difficult situation because I ended up having two of the people that I had employed who had inherited with practice come after me for $150,000 for wrongful dismissal. So suddenly my world started to feel like it was crashing. I had this massive lawsuit on my shoulders. Patients were starting to cancel left, right, and center because while I was so busy working my butt off, I didn't realize the economy had shifted and we were in the full throes of the global financial crisis. So that took me down a pretty dark rabbit hole, which I'm not going to get into right now. But it ended up having me hit another crossroads where I had to decide, am I going to let this whole thing take me down? Or am I going to get back on track and start living my dreams again? So I made a decision to step out of a really dark situation and start going after my dreams again. I rebuilt a completely different brand in the practice, which allowed me to be able to cater to phobic patients. So I did my COIS program, I did my IV station, sleep apnea, as well as implant certifications over the next 12 months. So I was kind of binging on achievement, trying to recover from that dark situation that I was in. And it allowed me to build a brand that completely catered to the phobic population. It allowed me to also develop a brand that allowed me to gain a lot of referrals for my practice. And suddenly I became known as the phobic dentist, which was kind of an amazing thing to go from, this broken down practice, hitting rock bottom, and then starting to be a member of the dental community that was actually helping other dentists, even though I was just a general practitioner. That went on beautifully for a couple of years. And then I ended up with an injury in my right hand that ended my career. It's actually a condition called focal dystonia. And the gist of it is my genetics don't actually play well with overusing my manual dexterity. So my beautiful career killed my beautiful career. Shortly after that, a couple of years, we started to enter the oil crisis in 2015, and my practice was in Calgary. So we were heavily reliant on oil. And as I saw the economy starting to tank, having gone through the global economic crisis, I was like, I'm out, and decided to sell my practice and move on to different things.
Wow. I've listed these out, Angela. As you've been talking about these things, I'm looking at this list in front of me. I'm just taking notes and looking at challenge after challenge that has come, from, really kind of inheriting this practice or getting in this practice that's already in a bad shape, to then, building it up. And then you're this setback after setback with litigation, financial crisis, and then, and then you kind of climb out of it. And then another crisis on top of that. Like that's pretty crazy. Do you ever look back and think, like, it's probably easy to look back and think, well, why me? You see probably practitioners all throughout the country and you talk to a lot of them, and their plan, their story matches their plan, and yours really doesn't in a lot of ways. How have you, just briefly, because I know this isn't really the scope of this, but I just think it's so important for people to realize, how have you managed that adversity, because you've had it time and time again.
Yeah, well, I've spent a fair amount of time in the corner crying. When you've worked that hard to try and make something happen, and I always say it's the universe slapped me out of the sky back down to earth to start again. It's pretty brutal. And when it was happening, I wasn't having a good time, obviously. But after I sold my practice, it allowed me to look back on and go, okay, I've had more interesting experiences, we'll call them interesting experiences,
Yeah.
than most people would have in their lifetime of being a practitioner. And I was 32 when I lost my ability to use my hand properly.
Wow.
So I decided, you know what, there's got to be a reason I've gone through this. There's got to be a reason for me to be where I am right now, having stepped out of the practice. And there's got to be a way I can use this to contribute to the dental community. So I decided that bundle of experiences I could use to actually coach other people. So I developed my business coaching company called Unleashing Dentistry's Potential. It was originally called My Business Doctor Inc. And developed a course around how to navigate all those pitfalls that I had been through, because I didn't want anyone to have to go through even one of those, let alone all of them in their career, because it's brutal, right?
Oh, so brutal, so brutal. Well, and that's so neat though that you've taken that and now you're probably helping your influence has probably been amplified and magnified so much more than if you would have just had it kind of your way that you'd planned out initially. But it's neat to see how that works in the end. If you have that right mindset and you have that right attitude.
Yes, absolutely. And that's when people started telling me, this is the way things were supposed to be for you. You weren't supposed to be a dentist forever. It was like a knife in my heart being twisted.
Right. Yeah.
But I've gotten past that. And with my business coaching company, when I was trying to get it noticed, I was using LinkedIn. And because I grew from 200 to 12,000 followers in a year, people started asking me to help them with their businesses, mostly outside of dentistry, actually. So that's how Unleashing Influence came about. And so now I help so many different talented practitioners be able to get noticed by the right people. And a lot of them, their story is the same. Not the brutalness of the story, but that shyness of trying to get out of their own way, try to get noticed so they can help the right people. So it's interesting to be able to pass on that shyness journey as well as the business journey to help people to be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it can be challenging, right? I mean, especially as you're starting, when you think about, social platforms, you think about putting yourself out there, there is a natural hesitation to that because I think a lot of us feel this way. We kind of want to come across as braggy or cocky or arrogant, and so, but at the same time, there's an element of you do need to, recognize the value that you can provide. And so you do need to you need to communicate that to the world. So let's take a minute and just talk about that a little bit, because that's a hurdle I see a lot of practices that I work with as well, that they're just not, I don't want to do that. Like that's really not their forte.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in dentistry, we're kind of taught in school, you build a practice and keep your head down, keep working your patients, take really good care of them, and everything will take care of itself. And that's not really a realistic model anymore. But we're quite comfortable hiding in our operatories and just keeping our head in people's mouths and thinking that if we just keep doing that, everything will turn around. And so it's really uncomfortable to step into the limelight and actually talk about what we know. But I think if practitioners can think about social media and marketing the way that they think about trying to take care of their patients, that's a mind shift that they'll be quite comfortable with. So when we're trying to take care of our patients, we're trying to do a good job. We're trying to educate them. We're trying to make sure that they're having the best options. If we do that on our social media, we don't go in there narcissistically. We go into it thinking about how we can serve our patients by providing that education ahead of time, allowing them to know the options, and having that ongoing conversation with them throughout the year, so that we aren't just having that talk for 2 minutes every 6 months. That's where we can actually expand the reach to our patients, being able to educate them, being able to show them the options while we are away from them, and starting to show them the possibilities for their health and for their care in general.
Well, that's an important thing to remember. And I think a lot of people, it makes it a lot easier when you phrase it that way, or they can remember the context in which they're doing this. Because if it is just like you're treating a patient, then you're really not trying to be overly aggressive. All you're doing is looking out for their care, really, and you need to, in order to do that, you need to explain the natural or the likely consequences if you take path A or if you take path B, so that they can make the best decision possible. And as that, I imagine that's resonated quite well with a lot of your clients and practitioners around the country. Would you agree with that?
For sure. And it doesn't have to all be about the services. Like your patients, especially since the pandemic hit, people want connection, right? And if they can feel like they're getting to know you a little bit behind the scenes, when they come and meet you again, they know even more about you. They've seen your passion. They've seen your expertise. They've seen what makes you tick, why you're on this journey. Because most of us who are still in dentistry, we know it's not the easiest path, right? There's way easier things we could be doing with our careers than working on people. But if we're sticking to it, there's a reason why we're sticking to it. There's something that is a burning desire in us to help people. And when that can come across with your social media, your patients are going to get more on board with everything that you're doing and be more interested to actually help themselves because of who you are to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And especially now with I mean, there's just so many options when it comes to dentistry and finding a dentist, as far as consumers go and patients go, they literally have dozens, sometimes hundreds of options depending on where you live,
Mm-hmm.
for a dentist. And so if you can, if you can build that rapport and create that connection with patients and they can get to know you. I love how you said that, kind of the behind the scenes, who you are as a person, then they're going to find that, you're going to attract those people that are really naturally a good fit for you and your personality and your style. And it's going to make that relationship so much better than, if you're just trying to attract, I don't know, if they're just coming in off the street, so to speak.
Yeah. And people are checking out social media. If they're looking you up on Google, that's probably a starting point. They're going to look at your ratings. They're going to check out your website. But those things are very static, right? We have a perfect snapshot in time with your website of, the day you had amazing hair because you had a hair artist, you had a makeup artist, you had a great photographer, perfect content writer. But the social media side of it is, when we say it's organic, it is organic. It's not perfect. We're not going to have perfect hair every day. We're not going to be in the perfect situation with perfect lighting. So we allow ourselves to actually be more human through our social media than we can ever be with our website. And it allows us to be caught up all the time too with what we're doing. With the pandemic, the people who took to social media and talked about what was going on and were like, you know what, I don't know what's happening, but this is what we're doing. We're going to deal with this the best way we can. They did really well on the other side of it when practices opened back up. The ones who went with their inherent nature and kind of hid their head in the sand, they didn't do as well because their patients felt like they got abandoned by them. Yeah. And it was as simple as just getting on there and talking about the situation, being like, this is, we're all in this together. We're doing our best. We know you're doing our best, and we're going to move through this as gracefully as we possibly can with the information that we have.
Yeah, and what I love about social too is that it's so accessible. You don't have to log into a website and figure out how to create a post. I mean, we're all to the point where we can post it so quickly. I mean, you have these quick links on your phone, and you just open up a picture, and it goes. You can send it to wherever you want, pretty much now. And so it's. Yeah, and I love just how you talked about that too. When during the pandemic, there were a number of practices that didn't know what to do, and so they didn't do anything. But the thing is, what's cool on social is that you can get out there and even express, say, here's what we know. We obviously don't have all the answers, but here's what we know so far. And here's the things that you can do. I saw this a lot too with various clients. Is here's what you can do while we're not able to see you, and just again. You're demonstrating your concern for your patients that, hey, I understand that there's things going on that we can't control, but here's what you can do during this pandemic, and we're going to keep you posted. And I saw a great video of a dentist who was, just pulled up his phone, like you said, imperfect lighting, imperfect audio, but you could feel his sincerity. He just was doing a little selfie video and just expressed how much he missed seeing his patients. And just things like that, where it's a very real, very candid moment that you're sharing with your patients. They don't forget that, I mean, that's what's really cool about social. And just love how you put that together. So Angela, tell me a little bit about LinkedIn, because, when we talk social, a lot of people automatically go to Facebook and Instagram, and now even TikTok can be included in that to some degree. But LinkedIn, as a dental, as a dentist, why LinkedIn, would you say?
Well, there's two reasons. So one is the patient stream, and then one is also attracting team stream. So with our patients, it depends on who your patient base is. If you tend to attract a lot of people who are blue collar or white collar, they are people who work, then LinkedIn, you're often going to be able to easily find them. So you can hyper target, the location that they're in, the education level that they're in, the age that they are, much more easy than you can do on something like Instagram or Facebook, unless you're doing paid advertising. So if you're trying to organically get out there, and that is the right kind of audience for you, then LinkedIn is a really great place to be. And, the people who hang out on LinkedIn are typically looking for high caliber work, right? So if you're someone who is doing something different, you have a niche that is necessary. Obviously, you're not going to send a message be like, hey, I'd like to take your wisdom teeth out because you don't know anything about them.
Right.
But if you're showcasing what your practice is about, what your team is about, what kind of offerings that you have, you can actually attract quite a few patients through LinkedIn and hyper target based on your really the archetype of patients that you typically treat. And so it takes a little bit of finessing going through your practice management software and being like, okay, who is our top 20% that we like working with? And what do we know about them? So that we can actually go into LinkedIn and go and find those kind of people, engage with them. You don't even necessarily have to have a conversation, but having a conversation is helpful so that you actually start connecting with those people, not just collecting them into your audience. And, you send a message to someone saying, hey, how's everything going? You have about a 50% rate of people replying back to that. And they'll tell you lots of different things and they want to know about what you're doing. And you ask them questions about them, you're going to have quite a lovely conversation that can turn into business right now, or maybe the next time that they're looking for a practitioner. Because most people are not willing to put themselves out there and have those conversations because it's uncomfortable to talk to a stranger. But if you can get uncomfortable with that, then you can actually do quite well as well.
So you're saying that on LinkedIn, you have the ability to target via, education level, income level, and things like that, just even for your and when you say that, do you mean like if you do an organic post on LinkedIn, you can specify who that is shown to, or is it more when you're reaching out to people that are on LinkedIn?
It's when you're reaching out. So with LinkedIn, well, with any of your social media, you don't want to just be putting stuff out there and kind of hoping for the best and hoping that the right people will see it. You want to stack the deck in your favor by actually building the audience that you want. So it's like, if let's say you play well with accountants and you play with accountants at this one really big firm, it's like, well, in my town, there's 5 other really big firms full of those same kind of accountants. You can go in and start going after people in that company. You can go after people with that same qualification. Maybe you want to go after people who are a certain age range with that qualification. You can actually go in and see when they graduated and start actually hyper targeting that and pull those kind of people into your audience. The more you actually engage with them, the more you connect with them, the more likely they're to watch your content as well. So I don't believe in just throwing it up there and hoping for the best. Right. I want to look at the science of what is happening in my practice and how can I use my social media to scale that up in my practice.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that makes so much more sense. You take the time to, like you said, to identify who that top 20% is in your practice that you ideally love working with, but also that provide, it's the 80-20 rule, the 80% of your production, and then transfer that, really dive deep into who those people are, what their interests are, the professions, things like that. And then you transfer that knowledge. You're saying transfer that knowledge to LinkedIn by now you're doing some work to connect with people that are similar to that.
Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. So so if you have that, so do you have, or what would be your recommendation then, Angela? Would you have someone assigned in the practice to, this is obviously going to be probably a team effort to come up with that top 20% and really flesh out who those ideal patients are and what do they look like? But then from there, are you assigning that? Would you recommend assigning that to a team member or multiple team members to then, okay, this is what we're looking to do on a weekly basis, reach out to X amount of people? How would you strategize that?
Yeah, definitely. If you're going to be doing it yourself, you got to get someone committed on the team to doing it. And you can be spending maybe just 30 minutes a day committed to sending out messages to those right kind of people, trying to get a connection with them. And at the same time, you want to be having that content going out as well. So you got to have the twofold. You got to be connecting while actually providing value through your content so that you get people wanting to engage with it. But if you're doing it yourself, you don't have to be spending that much time, but you want to do it at a high level, going after that top 20%, not just helter-skelter, everyone in the greater New York area that you're trying to target with it. You want to be very specific to those kind of people that you work really well with. Because when they see your content and you show who you are, you show what you know, they're more likely to appreciate that than someone who's completely out of the realm of what you normally treat in your practice. So you want to stack the deck in your favor as best as you possibly can so that any effort you're putting in, 80-20 rule again, put in the best 20% to get the 80% reward, not the other way around.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I had a question too. You mentioned kind of this twofold process. So you've got, on the one hand, you are pushing, you're posting content and just so that once if you do make a connection or you reach out to someone, like they're going to go and check out your profile and see what you've done. Uh,
Absolutely.
what in terms of that content, do you have specific recommendations, or is it just, you're showing maybe before and afters, or are you showing kind of your expertise? Are you sharing kind of the personal side as well? Or is it just
Mhm.
kind of a combination of different things?
So I usually recommend trying to do 10 posts per month. So make 8 of them professional and 2 of them personal or fun. So that you're heavily relying on the professional side of what you're doing, but you're also holistically filling in a little bit more about what you and your practice are about outside of just what we do as a doctor or a team member. With the professional stuff, create a variety of content. You get asked questions on a daily basis. So start paying attention to what those questions are you're asked over and over and over again, and also how you explain it when you're just sitting there. Because a lot of times when we sit down in front of a camera, suddenly it's a totally different game than when we're actually sitting in front of a patient. And so it can be a little bit challenging to try and recreate that. So you have to pay attention. And your team members are listening to you all day long, how you explain things. Get them to check your content and see if that actually aligns with your content, how you actually act as a normal human being when you're sitting in front of your patient.
Yeah, there's that weird effect, when we open a blank page on the computer, or when we're in front of a camera, all of a sudden it's like we turn into this one of, aspiring actor or something, or, this writer. We want all this flowery language, but it rarely ever comes out when you're in an organic conversation like that. So,
Totally.
yeah.
And sometimes you have to take a couple of runs at it before it feels natural, right? You're going to be like, oh, there's a camera in my face. I have to be perfect. You get a little bit stiff. Your voice gets tight. So practice it a few times until it feels like the camera is the person sitting in front of you at the clinic.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great tip right there. Just it gets easier, it gets easier. I
Totally
remember
does.
when I first started my very first podcast, and I'm no pro by any stretch, but I I was so nervous. I probably recorded it like 10 times. And I was just recording the audio, I wasn't doing anything else. But yeah, it's tricky. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, the more you realize it's not as big a deal really that you make it sometimes. And like you said, it can humanize you really well when people see that maybe you stumble and you correct yourself. We do that all the time in conversation.
Totally. So aside from the frequently asked questions, I would also recommend 2 other things. So you mentioned before and afters. That's a great way to visually display what's happening. So the only problem with that is, like, if you're doing, a snaggletooth case versus a beautiful veneer case when it's finished, that can be really hard for a lot of people to relate to. Something as simple as, you knocked a cusp off and you restored it with a crown and it looks perfect compared to the other teeth that are in the mouth. It blends in beautifully. Those little simple cases, those small transformations, even an amalgam being changed over to a composite or an inlay, that stuff is relatable to a bigger part of the population than people who are, getting toilet bowl white teeth at the end of the procedure. So you can do those little transformations as well. If someone is doing a big transformation, sometimes they're not going to want you displaying their before and after, right? Because they're embarrassed of where they came from. But having them talk on camera about their journey with you, how it has changed their life, like give them a month of having that transformation, they can sell your practice so easily for you, even if it was something as simple as, you do TMD work or you do bite adjustments, and suddenly someone's gone from being in chronic pain to being able to eat again and sleep again and function again. Those things really are amazing for people to witness, and they're a story. We're wired for story, right? So if they can actually hear the story of someone's journey instead of just a before and after photo, that makes a big difference for how people connect with your content.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And when you're asking patient to do this, are you typically looking for them to record a video, or you're recording the video, or just have them write it down? What would you recommend?
It depends on your jurisdiction. So if we're talking like Canada, there's massive restrictions against having people do testimonials for you. So you have to be careful with what your governing bodies say. I never recommend leaving things up to the patient because we know we're all busy. It sounds like a great idea in the moment, and then they go back to their regular life, and then there's other things that get in the way. So if they've agreed to it, I would get them to agree to it, and maybe not necessarily do it on the spot, because they're going to feel uncomfortable. They're going to freeze on camera. They're going to beat themselves up after the fact that they said something that they didn't want to say. They didn't look the way that they wanted to look. So give them the opportunity to come back in a nice, quiet environment where there's no one watching, and set them up with a camera and do it that way. It'll make for a much more pleasant experience for the patient.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I love that. Give them a little bit of time and maybe some coaching and I, it reminded me of someone. I had a friend recommend this, because a lot of times we'll have those conversations with a patient after they've come in, like you said, maybe it's after a treatment like that, and you're asking them how things are going, and they'll say things, that are like perfect for a testimonial, and he suggested to write those down and then send them, either a text or an email and say, hey, you said this the other day and it really struck me. Wouldn't it be okay if I use that in a testimonial or something like that? And I was like, oh, that's a brilliant way to just do that, where it was very organic on their part. It sounds, it flows really naturally, and it's really what they're said too. So you're not conjuring this up out of thin air, but yeah. So I think that could be a good way to share that as well.
For sure. And that's another piece that you could take, like, aside from being on the platforms, using it for your Google reviews. So if someone said that, and, when you're going to send them the request for Google review, send that quote from what they said to them as well. Because then they're like, oh yeah, that's totally how I felt about this situation, instead of trying to come up with something unique in the moment.
I love that. That's even better. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I'm making a note right there. That's great. I just open a Google Doc and then I just type away. It's so great. That's what I love about these podcast interviews, because I'm experts like you, and it's just I get so much out of it too. It's great. It's fantastic. Yeah. So we talked about the twofold approach to this on LinkedIn. You're sharing good content. You've got this breakdown of kind of roughly 10 posts per month, 80% professional, 20% personal, kind of balancing that. If we're looking at the side of it where we're making connections, we're putting ourselves out there, we're trying to reach out to these people. Are you just doing a simple introduction, or what does that look like?
Depends on what you're comfortable with. But I want you to think about your experience on LinkedIn when someone sends you like a really long pitch and they know nothing about you yet. It kind of feels like you got slimed, and you're like, delete that. You're not even going to engage with it unless you're sending something like, what are you thinking? Right.
Yeah.
So what I actually find, most of the conversations that turn into conversations about social media that turn into a sale for my company start with, how's everything going? And just leaving it there. And you'd be amazed at how many people will open up to you about, if they see what you're about, they'll talk to you about your dental experience. If they see that you're an entrepreneur, they're going to talk about their entrepreneurial journey, whether it's a success or their failure. People are really craving connection right now, and you can just keep it as simple as that. And you're going to pen pal back and forth with them a little bit. That's okay. That actually is totally valuable if it turns into a client for your practice, right?
Yeah.
And in the moment, it can be like, oh, I don't have time for this, but I promise you, you have time for it. Especially if a new patient is worth $5,000 in an average practice. For some clinics, like the practice I had, an average patient was $20,000. So me spending maybe 30 minutes in total between all the back and forth thing over a couple week period, to me, that's totally worth it to actually get that client who I know is someone I can really help. They've already started to get to know me, so we know we're probably going to get along okay. And it turns into a beautiful relationship down the road as well.
Yeah. Yeah. At that point, they've already, they invested time, so much time, and they're, like you said, gotten to know you, that they're already predisposed to having you do all the work for them. It's just, that's what's neat about this whole process. And some people will get hung up on that. They'll get, well, I don't want to check a message every day and do little messages here and there. But the reality is it's a long-term relationship that you're building, yeah. And like you said, if you can remember that long-term, this, the whole context that this is going to be, several years of work with this person, this is just the very beginning. This is what we do on a regular basis. We have patients that come in and we see them for years and years and years. And this is just that very tip of the iceberg. And I don't know, I think if you can remember that, it makes it a little bit easier to check your messages and to write a thoughtful response and things like that.
For sure. And it's the same kind of wow experience as, if the doctor calls you after hours to check on how you were after your first appointment, that's mind blowing. So you can imagine having a doctor corresponding with you on social media. That's mind blowing as well. And it's going to, even if they can't afford to come to you right now, or maybe they're not due to come to anyone new, they're going to remember that you were that one person in 1,000 people that they talked to who had that high level degree, who actually took an interest in what they're doing and, wanted to engage with them and didn't just blow them off because they're not another doctor that they could be talking to.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It made me think of just, how impressionable that is to have someone, just being available. I mean, if you have that person in your contact sphere, I'm not a dentist, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a high level degree like that. It's so nice to be able to have connections like that I could reach out to, that I could find on LinkedIn and ask a question. It's not a burning question. I'm not going to go drive to a practice to go figure this out, but it's something I do want to know. And, or if you're among friends and someone else has an issue, you can say, hold on, I've got this dentist who knows he's the best, let me just text him, or let me just text her real quick and she'll be right. She gives you that answer, maybe not immediately, but you can get back to that. And that's what's cool. A lot of us love having those connections. We love sharing those connections, and people ask us for a recommendation. We get a thrill out of just providing a recommendation. I mean, it's not that we have to be rewarded for that or compensated for that, but there's an intrinsic reward there of sharing good knowledge with other people or a good connection with someone else. So
sure. Yeah. And when you can actually step off that pedestal, like people have us on a pedestal. If you are a healthcare practitioner, no matter what your role is, people have you on a pedestal because they've been helped by someone in that similar role before. And so when you step down and you're just having a human to human connection, a human to human conversation, it is sometimes a bit mind blowing, but it also makes you way more likely to support that kind of person than someone that you've never had that connection with.
Yeah. And I mean, we go through this all the time, I mean, you see how many different physicians that we see throughout the course of our life, whether that's for ourselves or for our kids or for our friends or whomever. And how little, we see that type of personal reaction in the industry. And I totally get it. And it's not just the healthcare profession. It's really across the board with almost all businesses, but just, if you take that time, it goes so far. You really don't have to put in that much effort to stand out tremendously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, whoa, this is great. This is such great stuff. Okay. So we've got this approach. We talked about the content side. We talked about making connection side. Another question I just had as we were talking about this is, okay, so maybe I have a frequently asked question that I want to address. I'm getting this all the time from patients. I'm going to open up about that. Would you recommend, is it just kind of a personal basis if you do record a video, or, I mean, do videos work really well on LinkedIn, or is it better to just take a picture and write about it? What would you suggest?
People really do like to consume video content. And if you're trying to get people to get to know who you are, video allows them to do that, as long as you can be yourself on camera. You can turn those things, like you can take those frequently asked questions, you can get a graphic designer to turn them into a visual post as well. That goes well. And if you have a series of videos that you've talked on a certain topic, for example, it's like, should I choose to replace all my amalgam fillings? There's a lot of layers to that, right? So if you wanted to go into that, you can have a bunch of little short videos. I would say go 1 to 3 minutes max, talking about those. You can take that, transcribe it, and turn it actually into an article. And on LinkedIn really does like original written content. People aren't necessarily going to read it all that much, I'll be frank with you, but the algorithm likes it. So you have to play the algorithm as well as play into what your patients want from you so that you're serving them.
Interesting. Okay. So they want to see, you want original content. Okay. And they prioritize that a little bit. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
They totally do. And like, I wouldn't be sharing something from, say, YouTube onto your LinkedIn. You can do it, it'll work, but the algorithm likes it more when you take an original MP4 or whatever type of format you're using and put it right onto the platform.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, cool. Because it doesn't want you to connect. They don't want to link off to the to their platform if you can. They want to keep you on there as long as possible. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay. What else? Any other? Oh man, we could keep talking about this for days. I literally have a page and a half of notes that I've been taking. But what other questions do you get a lot? When it comes to LinkedIn, and you guys service a lot of clients and you help them in a lot of different areas, not just LinkedIn. But what other questions specific to LinkedIn do you typically receive?
one of the questions I get is how personal is too personal?
Mm.
So a lot of that has to do with your brand. And the third type of professional content I would actually do is behind the scenes. So you can be kind of showing behind the scenes through your personal life without showing everything about your personal life, right? And that allows people to get to know you. For example, if you're journeying to go and take a course, doing some documentation of that, talking about like what you learned at the course, what you're so excited about to bring back to the practice. That stuff showcases your passion and it showcases the aptitude of what you want to do with your practice. It shows a bit of your niche as well. That stuff goes over really well. You don't have to show yourself going, like if you're a party person, don't show you out partying and drunk and whatnot.
Right.
That's not going to go over very well on LinkedIn, but you can showcase little glimpses of what you're really about behind the scenes. And, you have to figure out what your boundary is with your patients, with your audience, so that you're comfortable. Because you don't want to post something that later you're going to go, ugh, I can't ever take that back, because once it's up, it lives on the internet somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's a great one too. I mean, yeah, just kind of showing kind of a glimpse of what it's like when you're going to a certification or you're going to a course training or things like that. And I loved just that qualifying too. I mean, where you take it a step further, not just that, hey, I'm down in Arizona for this class, but here's what I've learned that really got me thinking or really got me excited to implement this in the office. Here's what it means for you as a patient. Like you could, because I think I see a lot of like our clients that we work with, they get really excited about implementing some of these new techniques of these having, installing and employing some of the use of these new tools and technology because they see what that can do for a patient. They don't always articulate it in the right way, in terms of how a patient would see that. But man, you start talking to them about that stuff and they get super excited and they can, like you said, they can really see that passion come through. And I think, yeah, so that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any last suggestions or recommendations before we wrap this up?
So what I would suggest is don't just get out there and start creating stuff. Sit down and figure out really what your practice is about. Figure out what your brand is about. Figure out like why you're doing what you're doing, what the story is of why you're still doing what you're doing and where you want to go. Because then you create what I call a North Star of everything that your content is going to point towards. If you go helter-skelter, people think they're going to think you're a bit of a flake. They're not going to understand what your brand is about and they're going to move on to something else. So I encourage people to get onto social media, but I caution you to actually make a plan first and plan out, over the year, what are the big 12 topics you're going to talk about and make each topic a 1 month focus before you move on to the next one. So you can bring out a lot of the information, make it so that people get a pretty good in-depth opportunity to understand what that topic is about. And it also makes it so much easier for you to plan recording. So you have 12 months worth of content, you've got the subcategories of that. Then you can sit down once a month and be like, oh, this is my topic of the month. Okay, I can do with that, or I can do that. And then you're not scrambling each month going like, ugh, what am I going to talk about? Because if you're scrambling, you're not going to do it, right?
Yeah, always happens. Always happens. Yeah, and I would suggest too, getting your team involved once you have that, once you have those topics planned out and if you're not sure on what to, what that post should be about for that month, for example, ask your team members, what are patients inquiring about in terms of this particular treatment or things like that, and get them thinking about this as well. So it's not just not all on your shoulders.
Absolutely. And your team would love to be on there with you. If they've been working with you for a while, they're really proud of about what your practice is about. And for them to be able to get out there and help with the marketing side of it, it will be their pleasure for the most part to do it. There's going to be some people who are shy who are like, ugh, I don't ever want to get on there, but a lot of your team will be willing to actually help out as well to make sure that they help the practice to be successful so they can help the patients that need them.
I love it. I love that. Yeah, that's powerful. Get more people involved, increase your reach as well. So, and it just reinforces that, that whole relationship within a team, that you're recognizing them and their contributions, that they are truly a big part of what you're trying to do. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Angela, thank you so much for taking time with us today. Last question would be, okay, if people want to learn more about you, connect with you, or learn more about Unleashing Influence, what you guys do over there, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I would say send an email to my assistant. So go to info@unleashinginfluence.com and she will happily get you connected for a call with me. If you have questions and you need a few tips and tricks, always happy to talk on that call about that. Or if you want someone to help you to like reinvent your social media, whatever you need, I'm happy to let you pick my brain.
That's awesome. Because I mean, you gave you gave so much stuff here today, and people could just take and run with this. Really, I mean, there's so much there. If you actually, I mean, I'm just looking at my screen. I really do have a page and a half of notes that I could take and go and implement. But I know the challenge though is that you're all wearing so many hats. So you got to decide: is this something I want to try and do myself or in house, or should I hire someone, talk to someone like Angela and their team and her team to do this for us that are really good at it and that know what they're doing. So if that's great. So we'll put this on the show notes, the info@unleashinginfluence.com. Reach out to Angela's team if you're interested in starting that conversation. But again, Angela, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story. And honestly, all the work that you're doing, it's incredible to see where you've been and where you are now. It's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, my friends. Thank you for joining us today on the show. And if you haven't yet, be sure to check out our website for resources, downloads, and additional information at www.dentalmarketingsecretspodcast.com. Again, that's dentalmarketingsecretspodcast.com. And we'll catch you next time on the show.